Subject enters the system at an unrecorded age. Approximate: 7 years. Entry classification: property. What the file does not record is this: the first morning, you did not know that was what you were. You thought you were a child. You thought the dust was just dust. You thought the sound of the overseer's rod striking the earth beside your feet was something that would stop. The file does not record what you thought. The record continues. Level 1. Field slave. The file calls it unskilled labor, agricultural assignment. You called it the ground. Record updated. Subject assigned to grain harvest operations, Eastern Delta region. Primary function: manual field labor under overseer supervision. Expected daily output: 1 aurora of cleared or harvested grain per 2-person unit. Caloric allocation: sufficient for continued function. Medical notation: none. What the record omits follows. The sun is not a metaphor here. It is a physical fact that arrives before you do and leaves after you collapse. You are 7 or perhaps 8. No one has kept precise count, and the file certainly has not, and the stalks of emmer wheat are taller than your head. You cannot see the end of the field. You have never seen the end of the field. You are not sure there is one. Your hands bleed in the first week. Not dramatically. Not the way a story would describe it. They crack along the knuckle, split slowly, and then the split fills with dirt, and the dirt becomes part of the wound, and eventually the wound becomes part of your hand, and you stop noticing. This is the first thing the field teaches you: what the body can absorb without complaint when complaint changes nothing. You sleep on a reed mat. There are 11 others in the space with you. The smell is salt and sweat and something older than both. At night, one of the older men hums something you cannot identify. It has no words. You learn later that it had words once, that he removed them deliberately, that the words were the name of a village that no longer exists in any way that matters to him. You do not know what you lost in this place yet. That knowledge comes later. What you understand now is simpler. The rhythm of the work, the angle of the hoe, the way to position your back so that the pain becomes dull rather than sharp. You learn efficiency not from ambition but from survival. Every wasted motion is a moment of extra suffering. You eliminate waste. You are not unhappy in the way you will later understand unhappiness. You are simply not yet a person in the full sense. You are becoming one, slowly, in the hours after the work ends and before sleep takes you. In those hours, you watch the sky. The sky is the same sky as everything above you. This matters more than you can articulate. What the file does not record: on the 73rd day, you finish your section of the field before anyone else. The overseer says nothing. But he does not strike the earth beside your feet that afternoon. You do not know yet that someone has noticed. Level 2. House slave. The file calls it domestic service, estate reassignment. You called it walls. Record updated. Subject transferred from agricultural field labor to household service, estate of regional administrator, nome of the hair. New classification: domestic. Duties include water carrying, grain grinding, fire maintenance, general labor as directed. Physical condition at transfer: adequate. Behavioral notation: compliant, observant. What the record omits follows. The house has ceilings. This sounds like a small thing. It is not. You stand in the entrance corridor on the first morning and look upward, and the ceiling is painted, blue and gold, a repeating pattern of lotus flowers, and you stand there for 4 seconds too long before a senior house slave touches your arm and pulls you forward without saying anything. The touch is not cruel. It is informational. It means, you can look, but do not stop moving. You learn the interior geography of the estate within 1 week. You learn which rooms require silence and which tolerate sound. You learn the administrator's wife prefers water carried in a specific jar, not from preference but from habit, and that disrupting a habit is a category of offense even when the offense has no name. You learn that proximity to power is not the same as safety. It is, in fact, almost the opposite. The grain grinding begins before dawn. The stone is heavy and the motion is circular, and after 2 hours your shoulders feel like something separate from you, like objects attached by cord rather than tissue. You grind. You carry. You sweep. You stand near walls when others speak. You listen. This is where listening becomes a skill rather than a reflex. You begin to hear things. Conversations between the administrator and his scribes. Numbers, quantities of grain, allocations, disputes with neighboring estates. Names of officials in the capital. The name of the Pharaoh said in tones that shift depending on who is in the room. You do not record these things anywhere. You record them inside. One of the senior house slaves is a woman of perhaps 40 years who has served this estate since she was your age. She teaches you the proper angle for pouring wine, a thing that matters, apparently, in ways you did not expect. She teaches you that the space between functional and invisible is where you want to live. Functional means they need you. Invisible means they forget to resent you. You understand this. You apply it with discipline. What the file does not record: 6 months into your service, the administrator's eldest son, 12 years old, soft-handed, already wearing the sidelock of youth, follows you into the storage room and asks you what your name is. You tell him. He repeats it carefully, as though testing whether it fits in his mouth. Then he leaves. He asks again the following week. And the week after. You do not know yet what this will cost you. You only know it feels, for the first time, like being witnessed. Level 3. Skilled Craftsman Slave. The file calls it Specialty Labor Reassignment, Construction Division. You called it Purpose. Asterisk. Record updated. Subject demonstrates numeracy and spatial reasoning. Reassigned to Temple Construction Auxiliary, Memphis District. New function: measurement, material coordination, junior supervision of unskilled teams. Age at reassignment: approximately 15 years. Notation: subject shows capacity for instruction retention above standard classification. What the record omits follows. They give you a measuring cord. It is 40 cubits long, knotted at regular intervals, worn smooth by previous hands. You hold it on the first morning like it is something borrowed from a category of person you have not yet become, and the master craftsman, a broad man with chalk dust permanently embedded in the creases of his forearms, takes it from you immediately and shows you, without patience but without cruelty, how it is held properly. The cord is a tool. Tools are not held with reverence. They are held with accuracy. You learn to be accurate. The work is measuring, leveling, calculating the grade of a foundation surface using methods that are old before you were born. You learn that a wall looks wrong from a distance but collapses from within. You learn that precision is not a luxury, it is load-bearing. Everything that rests on the wall above it depends on what you do here, now, correctly. This is the first time in your life that something depends on your correctness rather than your compliance. The shift is not small. You feel it in the back of the mind, in the place where you have been storing the overheard numbers and the administrator's conversations. Something organizes differently. You are not just absorbing information. You are using it. The other craftsmen are freemen, most of them. They do not resent your presence as much as they ignore it, which is a form of acceptance you have learned to recognize. They eat together at midday and you eat slightly apart, and no one makes this into a conflict. It is simply the arrangement. After 3 months, one of them occasionally hands you a portion of his bread without ceremony. This is the full extent of welcome. You accept it as such. You supervise 2 teams of field laborers reassigned to hauling work. You give instructions. They follow them. The power in this is strange, not pleasurable, exactly, but structurally new. You are careful not to use it like a man who has just discovered it. You use it like the measuring cord, with accuracy. What the file does not record: one evening, alone on the construction site after the teams have left, you stand at the base of the foundation you have spent 4 months leveling and look upward at the space where the wall will be. You calculate, without paper, what will sit on top of what is below. You are correct. You know you are correct before you check. You stay there longer than you need to. The sky has turned the color of copper. You do not move until it darkens. Level 4. Freedman Artisan. The file calls it Manumission, Conditional. Reclassification, Free Laborer, Skilled. You called it the First Breath. Record updated. Subject granted conditional freedom by estate, following petition of Master Craftsman and notation of exceptional service. Terms: subject remains attached to Construction Guild, Memphis District. Freedom of movement, partial. Legal standing, Limited. Age at manumission, approximately 19 years. What the record omits follows. The document is small. You expected something larger. A clay tablet the size of your torso, perhaps, or a papyrus scroll requiring 2 hands. Instead, it is a narrow strip, pressed with a seal that means conditional release, and the overseer of records reads it aloud in a room that smells of dust and natron, and when he finishes, he hands it to you and moves to the next administrative matter before you have taken your second breath. You walk out of the records building holding the strip of papyrus and stand in the street, and the street is the same street it was this morning, and you are, in all visible ways, the same person you were this morning. But the cord has been cut. The one you did not know was tied to you until it is gone. Freedom at 19 in a city like Memphis means you can sleep in different places. You can negotiate your own labor contract. You can walk past the estate of your former administrator without legally belonging to it. These are not small freedoms. They are also not the freedom you imagined as a child on the reed mat, listening to the man hum the nameless song. You find housing in a craftsman's district, a single room with a dirt floor and a view of a wall. You pay for it with the first wages you have negotiated for yourself. The amount is modest. The act of negotiating it is not. You work. The guild assigns you to larger projects now. A tomb preparation in the necropolis. A renovation of administrative buildings in the northern quarter. You develop a reputation for measurement accuracy and for a quality the senior craftsmen call quietness of error, meaning you catch your own mistakes before they compound. This is worth something. It is worth, specifically, a 12% wage increase over the course of your second year. You learn to read more formally. A scribe at the guild teaches workers on rest days, for a small fee. You pay it. You read construction specifications, inventory records, administrative orders. The language on official documents is not the language of speaking. It is harder, older, more precise. You learn to move between both. What the file does not record. One afternoon, 3 months after your manumission, you walk back past the estate where you spent 7 years as a house slave. You do not go in. You stand outside the wall and listen. You can hear, faintly, the sound of grain being ground. The same sound. The same hour. Nothing has changed inside those walls. You have changed outside them. The distance between those two facts is the largest space you have ever stood in. Level 5. Junior Scribe. The file calls it Administrative Auxiliary, Gnome Record Keeping. You called it the door. Record updated. The subject demonstrates advanced literacy and numerical capability. Nominated by Guild Master for Scribe Auxiliary Training, Gnome Administration, Memphis District. Entry Level, Junior Scribe, Inventory and Labor Records. Age at entry, 23 years. Prior classification history, noted but not displayed on current documentation. What the record omits follows. The scribal school does not admit you to its halls. You are too old for that, and the wrong history besides. What you receive instead is a lateral entry, a recognition of demonstrated skill, an assignment to the lowest administrative position that requires reading and produces records. Junior Scribe. The boy who copies the man who writes what the official dictates. The palette is yours to purchase. You spend more than you should. You hold it that first morning and feel, for reasons you cannot fully explain, that this object is the first thing you have ever owned that corresponds to the person you intend to become rather than the person you have been. The work is copying. You copy grain allocations, labor rosters, building specifications, delivery records. Your hand cramps. The hieratic script requires a precision of stroke that your construction-trained hands have to relearn from the bone upward. You practice in the evenings on scraps of damaged papyrus that the senior scribes discard. You practice until the lamp burns out. You begin buying better lamp oil. You are the only person in the record room who is not the child of someone. Everyone else arrived through lineage, a scribe father, an official uncle, a grandfather whose name still appears in some record somewhere. You arrived through a measuring cord and 7 years of listening. You keep this to yourself, not out of shame, but out of strategy. You have learned that information about yourself is a resource to be managed. The senior scribe is a man of 45 with ink-stained fingers and a precision of movement that tells you he has been doing this since he was 10. He does not dislike you. He does not particularly like you. He evaluates your work with the same disinterest he applies to everything, which means only accuracy matters to him, and accuracy is the one thing you have always had. At the end of your 4th month, he corrects a calculation in one of your records. You review the original figures that night and discover that the error was in the source document, not in your transcription. You do not say this immediately. You confirm it 3 more times. Then you bring him the original document, the corrected figures, and a brief notation of the discrepancy, without comment. He reads it for a long time. Then he makes a note somewhere you cannot see. What the file does not record. You are copying a labor roster one morning when you recognize a name in the unskilled labor column. The name is the name of the man who hummed on the reed mat when you were 7. You do not know if it is the same man. You copy the name carefully. You copy it exactly. You move to the next line. The record contains no notation of what that costs. This section of the record is incomplete. What was withheld? The channel. If you remain in the early levels of something, and you may be, and that is not a judgment, subscribing to this channel costs nothing and omits nothing. The rest of the record continues as follows. Level 6. Royal Scribe. The file calls it Senior Administrative Classification, Palace Auxiliary. You called it the weight. Record updated. Subject promoted to Royal Scribe designation following exceptional service record, 5 formal commendations, and recommendation of Gnome Administrator. New posting, Palace Administrative Division, Thebes. Access level, Intermediate. Subject age, 31 years. Prior classification history, sealed. What the record omits follows. Thebes is not Memphis. Memphis is a working city. Thebes is a statement. The temples are not buildings here, they are arguments made in stone, arguments that have been winning for centuries. The palace quarter sits behind it, all like the answer to a question the temples asked. You arrive in the early morning before the city fully opens, and you walk the processional avenue, and the avenue is lined with ram-headed sphinxes, and each one is the same expression, and the expression is, "We were here before you arrived, and we will be here after." You understand the expression. You decide to be useful rather than impressed. The palace administration is its own civilization. There are scribes who record the scribes who record the officials. There are records of records. There are archive rooms where no one has been sent in a decade because the filing system collapsed under its own complexity and no one has admitted this officially. You find one such room in your 2nd month. You reorganize it alone, in the evenings, without being asked. When the head of palace records discovers it has been reorganized, he assumes it was always this way and says nothing. This is fine. You did not do it to be seen. Your access expands. You begin drafting correspondence rather than copying it. You attend administrative meetings where officials dictate and you write, and the writing shapes the decision because the decision only exists once it is written. You begin to understand that language is architecture. It holds things up, or it fails to, and the failure is rarely visible until weight is applied. You still remember the measuring cord. You still calculate load. The social terrain here is dense. Everyone is positioned relative to someone else, and the positions shift with the proximity of the Pharaoh's favor, which itself shifts with the output of the harvest, the success of military campaigns, the politics of the priesthood. You navigate this terrain the way you navigated the estate corridors as a child, with functional invisibility. You are good at your work. You are not decorative. You do not seek favor through personality. You seek it through indispensability. It is slower. It is more reliable. What the file does not record. One evening, reviewing correspondence from a military campaign in Nubia, you read a casualty summary. The names are listed in administrative columns. Soldiers lost, classification, home gnome. You read the columns with the same clean attention you give everything. Then you stop. Then you read them again, differently. They are not columns. They are people who had a measuring cord or a reed mat or a cracked hand. You sit with this for a long time. Then you complete the document. It must be completed. Level 7. Vizier's Aide. The file calls it Senior Counsel, Executive Advisory Tier. You called it the threshold. Record updated. Subject elevated to advisory position under Office of the Vizier, Southern Egypt. Function, policy review, correspondence management, administrative oversight of subordinate gnomes. Age at elevation, 39 years. Prior classification history, sealed and inaccessible to standard record review. What the record omits follows. The Vizier is a small man who moves like something that has already decided everything before you enter the room. He has held his position for 11 years. He was the son of a Vizier. He knows this about himself, and it does not comfort him. It pressures him, in the way that inherited position always pressures people who are intelligent enough to know what they did not earn. You understand this about him within the first week. You do not say so. Your role now is to be his extension. You read what he cannot read because there is too much of it. You summarize without distorting. You flag what requires his attention and manage what does not. The line between the two requires judgment, and judgment is not in the file. It is something you have been building for 30 years with a hoe and a measuring cord and a palette and a late lamp. The power is real now. Not the decorative power of title, but functional power, the power to move things, to prioritize, to determine which problem becomes urgent and which becomes a record-gathering dust in a room no one visits. You feel it as a kind of permanent responsibility, not pleasure. Every decision you make on behalf of the Vizier is a weight added to a structure. You calculate load continuously. You have always calculated the load. You travel. You inspect gnome administrations on the Vizier's behalf. You sit across from local administrators who have governed their districts for decades, and you evaluate their records with the eyes of someone who has been on both sides of the reed mat. You know when numbers are honest. You know when they are dressed. You correct the ones that need correction. You do not humiliate the men who produce them. Humiliation is a waste. What the file does not record, one night in a provincial guest house, you cannot sleep. This is not unusual. Sleep has become a negotiation since Thebes. You lie on a surface that is considerably more comfortable than the reed mat, and you think about the reed mat. You think about the fact that the distance between them is 32 years of specific, daily accuracy. No more than that. No blessing. No luck beyond the luck of being observed correctly at the right moment by someone who valued what they saw. You think about whether this is a comforting thought or a devastating one. You do not reach a conclusion before the light changes. Level 8. High Priest of Ammonius/Regional Overseer. The file calls it Appointment to Dual Administrative Religious Authority. You called it the last door you expected. Record updated. Subject appointed co-overseer of Ammonius Temple Estates and Regional Grain Authority, Upper Egypt. Dual classification, administrative and sacerdotal. This appointment reflects an exceptional record of service and a recommendation from the Palace Inner Council. Subject age, 47 years. Prior classification history, permanently sealed by executive order. What the record omits follows. The Temple of Ammonius at dawn smells of Kifi incense and old stone and something underneath both that has no name in any language you have learned. You walk the hypostyle hall on your first morning in this role, and the columns are taller than the construction sites of your youth, and each one is carved with figures that have been here since before your grandparents were the age you are now. The priests watch you. They have their own hierarchy, their own language, their own system of entry and advancement. You have entered from outside it and been placed above it, and this is not something they misunderstand. They understand it precisely. You will need to earn them rather than command them, which is a problem you have solved before in smaller forms. The administrative portion is familiar. The grain allocations for temple estates are substantial, feeding thousands of priests, workers, and dependents. The records are enormous. You review them with the same attention you gave every record before this one. You find irregularities. You correct them without spectacle. Within 6 months, the surplus has increased by 17%. This speaks louder than any formal introduction. The sacerdotal portion is newer. You participate in rituals you learn with the same method you learned the hieratic script. Repetition until accuracy, accuracy until fluency, fluency until the motion belongs to you. You learn the prayers. You speak them correctly. You do not know, some mornings, whether you believe what you are speaking. You know that belief and accuracy are different requirements and that the role demands the latter. Unambiguously. What the file does not record, a young priest approaches you after evening rites, uncertain whether to speak. He is perhaps 17. He has the look of someone who arrived here by a path they did not design. You recognize the look with specificity. You ask him where he came from. He tells you. You listen to the whole of it. You give him no advice that evening. You only say, the work is in accuracy. Come back tomorrow. He does. Level 9. Pharaoh's Chief Advisor / Royal Chancellor. The file calls it, Appointment to the Inner Council, first among equals, Chancellor of both lands. You called it the room where everything is decided. Record updated. Subject appointed Chancellor of the two lands and first advisor to the throne. Access level, unrestricted. Age at appointment, 54 years. Prior classification history, inaccessible. Sealed by Pharaonic decree. The file notes that the subject's origin classification is no longer relevant to current standing. The file does not note what the subject thinks about that sentence. What the record omits follows. The throne room is the room where everything is decided, and the thing about rooms where everything is decided is that very little of it is decided in the moment. The decisions are made in the corridors before, in the correspondence the night before, in the appointments made and the records reviewed, and the conversations that lasted 11 minutes in a guest house when you could not sleep. By the time something reaches the throne room, it has already been structured. The throne room is the ceiling of what is already written. You are the one who writes it. Not always. Not entirely. The pharaoh is not a figurehead. The pharaoh is a force of will wrapped in the theology of a civilization, and the theology is not decoration. You have learned this. You work with it rather than around it. You bring the pharaoh problems that are already half-solved and options that are already weighted, and you present them without theater, because theater is for the throne room and this is the room before it. You have 17 people who work beneath you in direct service. You know their names. You know which ones are accurate and which ones are loyal and which ones are both and which ones are neither. You move them accordingly. You do not resent the ones who are neither. You simply do not give them load-bearing work. You learned this from the construction site. From the wall. The policies you have shaped now govern the grain supply of 2 lands, the labor allocation of 10 nomes, the temple estate system of the entire southern region. You think about the unskilled labor column. You think about the names in it. You have been in that column. You write policy differently because of it. Not sentimentally. Structurally. Systems that distribute load more evenly fail less often. This is not philosophy. It is architecture. What the file does not record. Some mornings, you walk through the palace before anyone else is present. The stone is cold. Your steps echo in the way that empty official spaces always echo, as if the space itself is aware of its own significance and slightly embarrassed by it. You walk the length of a corridor that is 400 cubits long, and you count your steps, and at no point do you feel like the person who slept on the reed mat. You also, at no point, feel like you have left him entirely. He is in the calculation. He is accurate. He is in the way you still check the numbers 3 times before you confirm them. You do not know if this is a gift or a weight. After 54 years you have stopped trying to sort the two. Level 10. Pharaoh. The file calls it Accession to the Throne of the 2 Lands. Horus name assigned. Solar designation recorded. Complete administrative and sacerdotal authority confirmed. You called it the sky. Record updated. Following the death of the sitting pharaoh without male heir, the inner council and the high priesthood of Ammonius convened in emergency session. The succession path is irregular. The record shows this has occurred before in the long history of the 2 lands. The record does not show how many of those who sat in the emergency session had begun their documented life as agricultural property. The answer is none. Until now. What the record omits follows. The double crown is heavier than it looks. This is not a metaphor. It is a physical fact. The inner white crown, the outer red crown, the combined weight pressing on a skull that still remembers what it felt like to sleep on a mat in a room with 11 others while a man hummed a song with no words left in it. The crown does not know this about you. The crown presses equally on everyone who has worn it. You find this appropriate. The ceremony takes 3 days. You perform each portion with the accuracy of a man who has spent 47 years learning to perform things accurately. The priests who witness you, some of whom have known you for 7 years, some who have known you for days and resent your presence in a way they will have to learn to manage, they watch your performance and find nothing to correct. There is nothing to correct. You are Pharaoh of the 2 lands. You sit in the throne room on the fourth morning, before any court assembles, and you look at the space in front of you. The room is designed to produce a specific feeling in those who enter it. A feeling of smallness, of standing before something that precedes and outlasts any individual. You have felt that feeling yourself, in this room, many times, standing before other men who wore what you are now wearing. You know now that the men felt it too. The room works on everyone, even the person in the center of it. The first administrative matter is grain. It is always grain. The Nile flood measurement from the Nilometer at Elephantine has come in at 16 cubits, adequate, not abundant. The harvest projections need adjustment. The labor allocation for the construction project in the Western Desert needs review in light of the adjustment. You ask for the records. They are brought. You read them yourself, not because there is no one to read them for you, but because you know what reading them yourself produces that reading through another person does not. You read them yourself because a man who has forgotten how to read his own records has forgotten something that cannot be replaced by the weight of a crown. You make the adjustments. You confirm them. You send the orders. The machinery of the two lands moves. 2 million people wake and work and eat and sleep and do not know your name yet, not fully, not in the way the histories will eventually record it. They only know the grain arrived. They only know the project continues. They only know the world is, today, approximately as it should be. This is what the file would call successful administration. This is what you call the measuring cord, held at both ends, 40 cubits of careful truth. The sky outside the palace window is the same sky you watched from the edge of the emmer field when you were 7 or 8, or whatever age the file declined to record. The same sky as the construction site at dusk. The same sky as the guest house where you could not sleep. The sky has not changed. You have only learned to stand at a different height beneath it. Somewhere in the palace district, on the east side of the administrative quarter, a boy of perhaps 8 years, a free boy, a worker's son, a boy with a future that has not yet been measured, stops in a street and looks upward through a gap between buildings. He is looking at the same sky. He does not know you exist. He does not know what the gap between his current and his possible life might one day look like if he learns to be accurate. He will not come to you. There is no door from that street to this room. But the record is open. And the next file has already begun. The subject enters the system at an unrecorded age. Entry classification: unknown. What the file does not record is this.